Today on Inside Utah Politics, the rise of fentanyl-laced drugs in our community. What's behind it, the impact it's having, and what are the solutions moving forward? We're checking in with the DEA. And the federal mask mandate on public transportation is extended, but this time it's facing a lawsuit. Why some are taking the issue to court.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Jay Tinkler. He's the State of Utah Assistant Special Agent in charge for the DEA, here to discuss the rise of fentanyl abuse in our community. Jay, so glad to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
A very important topic to dive into here this morning. Paint the picture for us. Tell us about the problem. What are you seeing here in the state of Utah?
So really what we're seeing now in the last 2 years is just a huge rise in the number of counterfeit prescription look-alike pills that contain fentanyl. And those have been attributed to a vast majority of the overdoses, fatal overdoses as well here in Utah.
When you talk about the impact it's having on our community, first let's start off with who's driving it, who's behind it, and why? Why is this happening?
So you look back a little bit of history, initially China was the country responsible because they were actually, manufacturing these counterfeit pills and shipping these things into the U.S. That changed, there was some legislation that took place and, they shut that down, but they did not shut the introduction and shipment of the precursor chemicals into Mexico. And so Mexico, the drug trafficking organizations are the ones that are producing 99.9% of what we see here in Utah and the vast majority of that you see throughout the country.
And why have we seen this trend with lacing these drugs with fentanyl? Like, what's the purpose and reason behind that?
So as you look at fentanyl, compared to heroin, it's a much more strong opiate. It's about 50 to 100 times more, lethal, 50 to 100 times more stronger than morphine itself. And so as you start to see, it's just a marketing for them. People, the word gets out on the street that, there's a new product out. There's something that really is more potent, has a much more of an impact when somebody uses this. And it just doesn't take long for that to trickle out into the community. And as you see, how fentanyl affects the body is so much more lethal, so much more deadly that, as we see 2 milligrams, that's a potential fatal dose for somebody who's not maybe a regular user or not used to opiates themselves. And so that's really where the real danger lies, is the fact now that not only do we see fentanyl in counterfeit pills, we are starting to see this in methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin that we're seeing across Utah and across the United States. And so that just lends a whole new look to the risk involved in using these narcotics.
Yeah. So manufacturers, dealers are intentionally doing this. Those who are using, are they doing so knowing, or in most cases are they unaware of the lacing?
You see both. And I've had conversations with some of our public health official partners, and where they were, do interviews of users, and they'll say, hey, it's worth the risk. That's just where they're at. The flip side of that is what we see, especially in the youth today, are the first-time users, the people who are unaware that they are actually taking fentanyl, and the deadly effect it has, how fast it takes effect of a body. And that's really where we're probably having more damage done to the community.
How addictive is it? Once someone tries a fentanyl-laced drug, are they hooked right off the bat?
I think that's dependent on the person.
Okay.
I think, unfortunately now where we're at right now, almost 50% of those counterfeit pills we see have got a fatal amount of fentanyl in them. And so, unfortunately, for a lot of people, the first time they use is the last time they use.
You mentioned that you're starting to see it mixed in even methamphetamine right now. We've always heard not even once with meth because of the addictive nature of it. What kind of an impact is that combination having?
So that's just amplifying what we see, in the public health system, out on the street. Like I said, a lot of times, people are buying something thinking that it's methamphetamine and it's got fentanyl laced in it, And so we've started to see an uptick in meth-related overdose deaths as well.
You've already mentioned this a little bit, but go deeper, if you will, into the impact that this crisis is having on our community right here in our neighborhoods in the state of Utah.
So, so it comes as no surprise. The last week or so, there's one of the latest arrests in an investigation that our office was a part of. It was somebody that was distributing counterfeit laced pills to some young folks around. And so when you look at that, the impact of that in our school system, our children, it's something that we need to talk about. There's a huge influx of pills being seized by our state and local uniformed officers and troopers out on the highway, because Utah sits at a kind of a crossroads of America, and so most of our narcotics, our illegal narcotics that are seized, are coming from California and Arizona. And so that's really, as you look at it now, when you look at this case, that's been in the news, and you look at the problem with that is it's the availability and the use of the internet, how easy it is to obtain these. That's really something that we need to all need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's very troubling to hear you talk about this being in a school setting and with our children. How prevalent is this problem with school-aged children?
It's more prevalent than we would like to admit. As a parent myself, it's one of those things. It keeps me up at night, and the problem is it's just the ease with which you can obtain these. With a cell phone, a smartphone, laptop, order something over the internet, have it shipped to your house, a friend's house, a post office box, and our kids are taking things that as adolescents, it's just part of growing up, taking risks and things like that. The problem is now they may think that they're taking OxyContin or oxycodone that they purchased over the internet, and unfortunately it's going to have a lethal amount of fentanyl in it.
Yeah. Jay, you mentioned yourself being a parent. What do parents need to know? What do they need to be watching out for within their own children for potential signs that they could be caught up in this?
I would say look for any changes in behavior. Be involved in your children. Monitor what they're looking at on the internet. It's never too early to start talking to your children. Elementary age is not too early to start talking to your children about the risks of. Never take something that doesn't come from your parents, your doctors, from a pharmacist.
Are you seeing cases at the elementary level?
We haven't, but we have seen fatalities in the junior high population.
Okay. So obviously the earlier you can start, the more foundation you can begin to build.
Absolutely.
As an organization, the Drug Enforcement Agency, what are the solutions moving forward? What are you doing to try to get ahead of this situation?
From our perspective, it's one of the big things is the public awareness campaign. The One Pill Can Kill DEA, published that this past year, and so it's really about public awareness, working together with law enforcement or public health officials to let people know what the dangers are out there, because unfortunately some people are going to take things regardless of what you say, but at the end of the day, I think if we increase awareness of that in this campaign, and of course we have redoubled our law enforcement efforts trying to slow this stuff down.
You mentioned a case from earlier in the week that y'all were talking about, and we've seen others just like it, where dealers have been arrested and facing charges for providing these fentanyl-laced drugs in our community. Talk about the seriousness of those charges and what dealers can be facing if they are convicted in a case like this.
Sure. So we've been very fortunate here in the state of Utah. The United States Attorney's Office have dedicated prosecutors to cases, and we look at these investigations. They're overdose, especially with the death as a result of, and so you're looking at a potential. This instance, this individual is looking at a potential sentence of 20 years in federal prison, and so if it's a case of a juvenile or child or something else, that even enhances that, and so. We get great cooperation from our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuting these cases, and so regardless if it's of the amount of fentanyl that we seize, we've been very successful in our efforts to put these people away for a while.
Do you feel overwhelmed in your work when it comes to this issue, or is there hope that we can begin to make a dent in it?
There are days, there are in the law enforcement field. I don't think anybody doesn't feel overwhelmed from time to time, but I think you have to keep pushing forward, working together, fighting the good fight, because what we're doing here is trying to protect our children at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we all know we've been dealing with this opioid crisis for years and years, and now this just adds a whole new level to it.
It does, unfortunately.
Yeah. Jay Tinkler, very important information. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Still to come, the refugee crisis in Ukraine from the eyes of a neighboring country. More on a visit from the Romanian ambassador to the U.S. a little later. But first, ahead of her first hearing, President Biden's nominee for the Supreme Court on Capitol Hill meeting with senators. Reaction after the break. Travelers will be required to wear masks on planes and public transportation for one more month. The TSA extending the mask mandate through April 18th. Republicans in Congress are trying to fight that decision, including a new lawsuit against the CDC. Washington correspondent Anna Warnicki has the latest from Washington.
It is time to end the COVID mandates.
Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz says Americans should be free to fly without a mask.
This is stupid. It's not health related. It's not science related. It's not medicine related. It is political theater, and it's time for it to end.
Cruz and Republican Senators Roger Wicker and James Lankford are calling on the Biden administration to end the mask mandate for public transportation, including airplanes, trains, and transit hubs.
Why don't we let Americans be Americans and to be able to choose in this process?
That mandate was set to expire on March 18th, but last week the CDC and TSA extended it for one more month.
It's important. People are crammed together.
White House COVID response Deputy Coordinator Natalie Quillian says the additional time is needed to carefully review and revise the policy,
so that we can give some predictability to when masks should be on to protect public health, and if the conditions are right, when they might be able to take it off. And I think CDC will produce that by mid-April.
Langford says the Senate will vote this week to end the mask mandate on modes of public transportation using the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to stop rules introduced by the administration. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are preparing for an intense hearing this week for President Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Washington correspondent Rashad Hudson with the preview.
As Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson meets with senators ahead of her confirmation hearing next week, her record is being questioned on the Senate floor.
The Soft on Crime Brigade is squarely in Judge Jackson's corner.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says Jackson is being pushed by the, quote, far left.
Before the 2020 election, one far-left dark money group put Judge Jackson on their Supreme Court shortlist.
Illinois Senator and chair of the Judiciary Committee Dick Durbin says Jackson is actually an ally of law enforcement.
He failed to mention she's been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, Mr. President.
The White House is aiming to secure bipartisan support for Jackson, but they can still confirm her with just a simple majority. And Democrats like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are lining up to defend the judge's record.
Judge Jackson is brilliant. She is beloved. She belongs on the Supreme Court.
Schumer says she deserves broad bipartisan support.
On top of her experience, she is unusually gifted at seeing and appreciating both sides of an argument.
The White House says Jackson has started preparing for next week's hearings.
She started practicing and studying and preparing, which I don't think surprises anyone.
Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Coming up, the Russia invasion of Ukraine and the impact on other countries in the region, how it's playing out for neighbor Romania after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
We turn now to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the situation at the border with other neighboring countries. For more on that, we turn to Mircea Vricin, the Honorary Consul of Romania to U.S. Utah. Hey, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us to discuss about this very unfortunate situation that's happening at the border.
No doubt about that. You hosted the Romanian ambassador to the U.S. here in the state of Utah during the week. What was the purpose of that visit?
We were talking about, coming over to the state of Utah to literally just strengthen collaboration and relationships and partnerships. Romania, President Bill Clinton in 1997 went over to Bucharest, Romania, and signed a strategic partnership with Romania that included, besides, military and safety and defense and security, economic, educational, research, cultural partnerships. And Romania at the time did not know much about it, was very excited. And we worked through it. In 2004, Romania became a NATO country, which was another great progress for Romania. And basically, this year, we're celebrating 25 years from signing the strategic partnership with America under President Bill Clinton in 1997. So his purpose was to come and celebrate that and then talk about the situation that is happening in our region. And that was what we visited.
So we'll dig into that a little bit more, the situation, but first talk about who you met with.
So we had the tremendous visits. We visited with the Lieutenant Governor. We visited with the President of the Utah Senate and leadership from the Senate and the House. We visited with many local businesses that are interested in doing business in Romania through the World Trade Center and the Chamber of Commerce. We also visited with Attorney General Sean Reyes and many other businesses interested in supporting the situation that is happening in Romania.
And what is the message you're receiving from those individuals?
We receive a tremendous message. I think everybody's worried and concerned, but probably nobody really realized. Obviously, everybody knows that there is a major concern in regards to refugees coming over, but nobody really probably understood or grasped the situation that is happening, in particular in Romania. Obviously, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, the border of Ukraine, there are several countries, Romania, Hungary, Poland, and other countries have received in a course of 12 days, just to measure that, 2.5 million refugees. 2.5 million refugees. United States last year, throughout the whole year, we got 2 million refugees coming through the southern border. And Romania and those countries got 2.5 million in 12 days. So
that
it's a
puts it in a very interesting perspective, no doubt. So what's going on at the border with Romania and Ukraine when you talk about those refugees fleeing into the country? Paint the picture for us. What's happening?
It is a tragic situation. In the course of 2 weeks, there's been over 500,000 people that crossed the border. And what we think is, maybe the first wave were people with means. A lot of people probably had resources. They went on, to maybe they had family in other parts of Europe. So Romania was a transition. But over 100,000 out of those are in Romania, stationed in Romania. And the situation is tragic. The Romanian government and we created a hub in Romania, up in the northern part of the country, to help with humanitarian aid and all the help them with food and housing and everything possible. And then
because they're coming over with pretty much nothing.
Pretty much nothing. Yes, it is a very tragic situation. But more than that, what's even more tragic is in many cases there are mothers and children and their grandmothers, because the man stayed in Ukraine to fight. So that makes it even harder for everyone. And, they don't speak the language. So there's a lot of things happening. But what's the message that the ambassador and I had obviously is this situation is tragic and it's imminent. It's happening very fast right in front of us. But this is not going away anytime soon. So we need to look at what's going to happen in a month, what's going to happen in 3 months and 6 months. A lot of the Romanians, took in their homes, families and children and mothers, but they can't live in somebody's home for extended amount of time. So we're trying to gain support from Utah to help us with know-how and experience, and how do you how do you deal with such a harsh reality of humanitarian crisis, and maybe for the long run, maybe there are some training opportunities, some opportunities to cooperate between Utah and Romania to deal with this crisis.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the feeling in Romania as to the Russia invasion. Where does it end? Are you fearful that President Putin could then go beyond other borders into neighboring countries in the region as well, or will it stop in Ukraine?
The feeling is grim. It is a very real situation, right? Romania went away. Communism broke in 1989, so 30 years later, you're reliving some of the situation. Chernobyl, nuclear plant had the explosion just before that, and that also created a lot of, problems in the region. So this is a very, very tough time for Romania, for everyone, really for the entire world. But the Romanians are fearful, yes. There is a very real possibility that this does not stop at the border with Ukraine. It could go into other places and escalate really fast. And
so on that note, what are you thinking about the response from allies? President Zelensky addressing U.S. Congress on Wednesday. How are allies responding? Are they doing what they should, or should they be doing more?
Honestly, I think history will be a judge of that. I think hearing from some of the people that worked in past administrations in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia, or 2014 when they invaded Ukraine, what we hear is that we should have done more. I read today that UK Prime Minister said we should have done more in 2014. I hope that this is not one of those times where we look back and we say the same thing, that we hope we should have done more.
Talk about the resolve of the Ukrainian people and what you were seeing. You talked about many of them staying to fight for their homeland, their country. Tell us about the Ukrainian people and what you were seeing out of them.
Well, we're just, I'm so speechless personally of the determination, to defend freedom. That's what's happening, is they really are fighting for their freedom, and literally to some degree for the freedom of the world, Western countries, if this doesn't stop at the border. So we're just so proud of what's happening, the resilience, and I am very proud of the Romanian people, regular people helping with the refugees crisis in Romania, and the Romanian government stepping up, and certainly even here in Utah, as Governor Cox has, with several other leaders, has started and started an initiative, raise money and funds and certain things to send over, and I've been in collaboration with them to help them with the Romanian presidency to find reputable NGOs that can help on the ground, that are already helping and doing things on the ground. And we really hope that more help comes out of Utah, can be a leader in this regard, and we're hoping.
So we have about 30 seconds left. How can people watching this right now, what can they do to help?
I think right now, if anybody's interested to help, they can certainly reach out to me, and then I can connect people with the embassy with Romania. They can certainly reach out to our to the fund that has been established through Spencer, to our Governor Spencer Cox. But there is a lot of need in Romania. I have been getting a lot of calls from locals here in Utah to help, and that is just heartwarming. And
a lot of people want to do what they can.
Absolutely,
here for sure.
and we're very appreciative of all the efforts that are happening here in Utah.
All right, Mircea, so glad to have you on the show. Interesting perspective. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The voter affiliation deadline for the year is March 31st. The Utah Republican and Democratic parties will be hosting their state conventions on Saturday, April 23rd, and the primary election is set for Tuesday, June 28th. Make sure to connect with me on social media or through email. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.